This is Visions Under Construction, a chance for our guests to share their visions and tell us what they're working on. For their continued support, we'd like to thank Simwood.com, who can turn you as a developer into a telco. Why not make CloudOnyx your communication partner? Go to cloudonyx.io. You can find everything about the VUC at vuc.me, thanks to Bluehost, and thanks also to zipdx.com, the conference bridge, and to voxphone.com for local rate dial-ins. So welcome to Vision 4, the VUC, January 26th, 2018. You've seen the numbers. Now take a look at this. We're going to meet in Berlin, most of us, many of us, some of us. This is backwards for me. May 14th of May, 16th, Berlin, Kamailio World. We love it. We can't say enough good about it. So we'll leave it at that. I am going to now manually switch over to my actual camera so you'll see the reality. The sad reality is right here. This is it. We've been doing this for 11 plus years. I happened to see this gentleman on Twitter, and I immediately asked him if he would agree. This was a couple of months ago, I think. Agree to join us. It's Daniel Stenberg, who is the author and maintainer of curl. Daniel, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, and thank you. Good to be here. I brought my curl t-shirt today to show off that it's me.
Excellent. And by the way, I was looking at the 2016 post that you did. Apparently there was, for something like 16 or 18 years, there was a couple of other logos. And so you recently, recently, a couple of years ago, redesigned that. So interesting.
Yes. We had a do-over and sort of refreshed it a bit.
Well, we have a little bit of a tradition here is generally when we have somebody on the first time, we ask them how they got into technology itself. In other words, what brought you to that part before we get started about the programming you've done and what you do? What was the technology attraction for you?
It was quite clear for me that I got a friend in my class in school when I was in I don't remember which grade, but I met the guy, and he had a computer, a Commodore 64, and well, we got acquaintance, and we started to learn BASIC, and we started to enter computer programs from the magazines from back in the day. So we started to sort of figure out how to do things, and of course play games and stuff. But what really intrigued me the most was how you could actually program your computers and make it do what you wanted to. And that's
did you peek and poke in BASIC?
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, I got really hooked on that, and then I, of course, me and my younger brother, we sort of collected money for a while, and we worked in some summer jobs, and then we bought a Commodore 64 in 1985. And then I was completely hooked on that. So I learned BASIC. We did assembler, we did demos, we did games in assembly and in 6502. So it's been like that ever since. It's programming computers. It was awesome, fun, and I haven't gotten tired by it yet.
So you had 4K, 16K, 64K, something like that of RAM on that thing. What was the next platform that was available that you moved to? I'm curious about the jump then from there.
Right, but in those days when we did demos and stuff, it's in the demo scene on the Commodore 64. It was quite common that you would go to the Amiga after the Commodore 64 because it was a Commodore computer. So that was the natural step. A lot of people did that, and I did too. But going from Commodore 64 to Amiga was a huge step. So it wasn't as fun anymore to do demos and games because it turned out completely different CPU architecture, and demos wasn't as fun because it completely changed the nature and the limitations and stuff. So then I got into C programming and started to learn how to actually do some real application. And then I started to work on a text editor actually, in the early 90s.
It's interesting because I started to write a text editor in assembly language. I'm not very good at programming, but I just thought, hey, this would be a great idea. So I imitated the PDP-11 editor, whatever the heck that was called. I got to the point of, I didn't save anything to disk because there wasn't any disk, but we were saving stuff to memory and trying to move the cursor around, basically, I guess was the big deal. I mean, how far we've really come a long way since the days of 64 times 48 pixel graphics of what I had in those days was TRS-80, so Z80, Z80.
Yeah.
And I did some 6502, did some 68, was it 6800? I can't remember now. The other thing, because we had sign boards that used some 6800 series as a as you would use a micro programmed thing today. In other words, they don't even use CPUs for that anymore. Anyway, from there, let's hear a little bit about the progression from, okay, so C, of course, and then what other languages were you interested in, or have you been interested in?
I got stuck on C. Well, I'm a pragmatic programmer, so I sort of use what I need to do to get the job done. And I've always been intrigued by doing sort of architectural stuff, getting foundations, libraries, getting things, and working close to the operating system. So I sort of always worked with networking and libraries and so on, and therefore using C has been a good choice. So that's why I've done most of my open source stuff in C, and I still do most of my open source stuff in C, even if I cheat and do things in other languages too when I have to.
A former employer of mine years ago, I think it was him, but maybe it was somebody else. Anyway, the point being, if you come up using assembly language of any kind, obviously C is the closest to that. At least it was at the time when I started it, and probably when you started, because what else was there? So you wanted to do bit operations, rotates, and sliding around bits and so on. C has all of the tools for that. I know that it's not fashionable today, maybe, to talk about such low-level languages, but I love them. I think they're great.
Right. Yes, and I think for a certain category of software, it still makes a lot of sense. And going then sort of fast forward into history, when I started doing curl and doing libcurl and stuff, I think it being written in C has been one of the conditions for it to sort of become as widespread and well used as it has been, because it's easy to port everywhere. So you can use it on any machine, any operating system, any CPU architecture. You just need a C compiler and, well, a rough API, but yeah.
Right. Okay, and to curl maybe, how did that happen? You must have seen a need for, should we say what curl is? I guess you'd be the best person to explain that.
Curl is, well, the curl project, we do two things in the curl project. We do one command line tool, which is a tool to transfer data specified as URLs, I would say, up and down, and URLs, so you would specify curl http / www blah blah blah, and 22 other protocols, I think. So there's a lot of different protocols, and what is sort of that's most commonly known by people, the command line tool. But the command line tool is then powered by the library, which is called libcurl, and which is a library or development library for programmers to use, which then offers those capabilities to other programs to do internet transfers using those popular internet protocols.
And
mostly, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, and I would say that HTTP and HTTPS are the sort of the popular and most used protocols that curl supports.
Okay, I was just going to say that I could dumb that down to an extent simply by giving a couple of examples that I personally have used. One is that if you get an account with somebody like Twilio, a lot of people here are familiar with that. Anyone who has an API, you are talking to, theoretically, the end result you want is to have an application that talks to something on the web. But while you're playing around with it, you want to be able to send commands to it, sort of as if you were testing a program, an app, and you were using standard input to talk to on a console and say, do this, do that. You want to see what the result is. Well, one of the main uses that I have had for curl, among others, is to try out routines in an API. They're probably not called routines. I'm sorry, I'm not an expert, but when there are examples in, say, this Twilio API where you want to say send an SMS, this is something that typically you might do in that world. Well, there is what are they? I guess they're REST calls. Somebody help me out here, right?
Yes.
One example. So with that, but basically that's a URL with a, and you could do this in both post and get methods, I think, with curl. So the point is you're simulating this program. And I can't think of a better way, because why would you want to write a bunch of code, test it, go, well, that didn't work, then write the code again, test it, and go, that didn't work any better. So rather than that, you're sending these commands live through curl, and that's one way. I mentioned to the guys earlier too, Daniel, that one real good use of curl that doesn't require anything is if you're suspicious of a URL, go to the command line. If you're on a Mac, you just open a terminal. Windows, I can't speak to, but if you're on any, go ahead.
Yeah, it's coming to Windows by default soon.
Oh, great. Okay, so the point is, anyway, you drop to this command. If you're going to use curl, you just curl the URL of the site that you're wondering about, and you'll see all the code. Now, obviously, if they just send a pack of HTML, that's one thing. But a lot of times, what you'll see is a redirect. And an example of that that I posted somewhere, and I'm going to try to find it real quick because it's right here. If you do curl https://google.com, what you'll see is a 302 moved document has moved to, and then it will move to whatever Google feels like serving you, which is usually www with a language specific, location specific or something. So, I mean, you might want to know exactly what's happening. And in the case of a suspicious site, you can actually see, and I've done this many times, you can see what exactly the code is that's being sent out. So if you're not sure of what a site is doing, you use it with curl, you're seeing on the screen what it's sending. And if you see tons of scripts that you don't understand or look suspicious or whatever, then you know that you did right to use curl and not your browser. Does that make sense to you, Daniel?
Oh, absolutely. And it is certainly used for sort of mimicking browser behavior very often too. So if you do something with your browser and you want to make a script to make it happen every night or every morning or every hour or whatever, it's fairly common to sort of, you script that with curl, because curl can basically do everything your browser can. Slightly more complicated, but you can still do it.
And there's lots of command line arguments. I've never actually known the exhaustive set of those, but whenever anybody needs one, you look at the manual and get it. And speaking of manuals, I wanted to make sure to mention that you have first of all, you have a great habit, which is you talk about open documents. And the one thing I noticed that surprised me on your site, not that you would do it, but just that you don't see that much of it, is you wrote a book, or you have this curl book together that gives all the details. In fact, it's called Everything Curl. And I made a VUC URL to redirect to it, by the way, so that I could say it when people are listening to this with their eyes closed on a train or something. Yeah, that's the version that's printed.
I have an actual printed version. There aren't that many, but I have one.
Well, there's also an HTML version, and that version can be had right now. Everybody, get your typewriters, get your keyboards ready, and type in vuc.me/curl, and you'll go to the HTML version. And of course, there's also a downloadable version. But the point is, this book, which I think you said was 85% done, something like that?
Yeah, something like that. 89, I think.
Here's 89 is close enough.
It keeps growing, so the number sort of fluctuates a bit.
Okay, here's James is showing us the table of contents and so on. And I found it really interesting too, Daniel, that it isn't just about curl. In fact, there's a lot of background about networks and protocols and so on. So nice work on that. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to sort of make a big grab around curl, what it is and how it works and why, and a lot of stuff. So yeah, it's
all right.
been
So
a journey.
We should probably invoke the idea of open source, because you are obviously a big booster of open source. What you're writing with curl, maybe you do other. There's actually a list of your projects on. Remind me of the shortest URL that people can go to learn about all this stuff. It's haxx.se.
Yeah, daniel.hax.se. So daniel.haxx.se.
Okay, and it's impressive stuff. So I recommend everybody go and take a look at that. Besides curl and libcurl, what else has happened? What other projects are you currently working on, or have you finished working on in the past, or what else is happening?
Well, of course, my primary project that I get paid to work on is Firefox, that I do sort of day by day. But otherwise, I would say that I also work on the libssh2 project and the CARIS projects, which are two libraries. One library for SSH and SFTP and SCP, and the CARIS is for asynchronous DNS results, basically, on the host name results too. So
and apparently,
both of those libraries are used by curl itself, so they're sort of associated to each other.
One of the interesting things about a lot of this open source code is that there are so many libraries out there, and it's fantastic that you're able to use them. And I think I'm going to guess probably that, say, if PHP wanted to include curl, and they do include curl functions, those functions are simply calling libcurl, right?
Yes. I think we have around 55 known bindings for different libraries, or sorry, different languages and environments. So pretty much any language you can imagine, and a whole lot more can actually use libcurl then, because people have written those little bindings, so you can actually access libcurl and get those abilities to your language of choice.
And I have used it in PHP and other languages. And by the way, this curl is also a way that you can scrape web pages, not in a weird or creepy way, but in a way of going, for example, has this RSS feed been updated? I mean, it would be very easy to write scripts using curl that could tell you whether something has appeared on an RSS feed or a web. Go ahead.
That was just some echo, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, that was echo. So yeah, there's that. I wanted to go in a little bit of a different direction, but right. It was my question was going to next question was going to be about that. You mentioned that you're a protocol geek at the Mozilla Foundation, right?
Yes.
What does that mean? I mean, we know what the words mean, but tell us a little about that.
Well, when I started to do curl, or actually even before I named it curl, I got interested in in networking in general and how to do things over the internet, and that you could actually, you could write clients that, well, independent clients and independent servers, and they would communicate as long as you have you agree to how you communicate over the network. So you would write, we could do different clients to the same server side and so on. And early on, I started out writing IRC bots, and then IRC was a protocol that was documented and that was fun. And then when I started to do that bot, and I wanted to add currency translations or exchanges for the channel, I wanted to get data over from the web then. So I wanted to get the currency rate. So I started to look into how to get data off web pages and look at that. That's HTTP. That's another way to communicate, independent clients and servers, and you just agree how to talk, and you can do that. And that is internet protocols. And sort of I've been interested in so that got me into protocols and internet networking from the beginning. And that's how I started. And after a while, when I had worked with curl for just a little while, it's sort of dawned on me, or I was poked at by others and met friends who sort of got me into how are protocols made, really? I don't only have to read about them in specs. I can actually participate in the meetings and sort of bring out my view to this and bring my experiences and ideas on how to do this, how to fix things or correct documents, and bring the world forward. So since I think about 10 years ago, I started to participate in the IETF in the protocol development there. So nowadays I sort of try to keep up with some of the protocols that are being updated, refreshed, or developed within the IETF.
And you are the perfect person to be a part of that, frankly, Daniel. A question about TLS. I recall, only from my user standpoint, I know that there's a switch in curl that you can say, don't worry about the certificate, or something, ignore the certificate or something like that. I just wondered, because now more and more sites are using TLS. In fact, I would say that most sites that have anything technical are. Was that a problem, or did you have to scramble to make changes, or was that always incorporated in curl?
We started out, well, again, there I started sort of without knowing much about TLS or anything. It just, whoa, I heard about TLS, or SSL as it was called back then. So yeah, of course we need that, or someone else actually contributed most of that initial patch. So, oh, nice, let's go with that. And it wasn't only until after a few releases I sort of realized what these certificates actually mean and what importance they have when doing TLS communications. So from the beginning, we pretty much ignored the certificates until I sort of realized that no, you shouldn't ignore certificates. That's a crucial part of doing SSL or TLS. So then we switched then we sort of reversed that default decision. So nowadays we always check the certificates unless you actually forcefully tell curl to no, ignore. But ignoring the certificate check, that's making the TLS connection pretty much insecure. You don't know any longer who you're talking to. So it could be someone else. So it makes the communication insecure.
But to test, everything, anything goes. Here, I just thought for the heck of it, I would do the man curl, the manual, and take a look at the number, the sheer number of, maintaining this has got to be interesting, let's say. There are tons of resolve name type.
I can't think where you got that idea from, Randy.
Were you doing that? I'm sorry, I noticed that you were showing the document that you.
No, it's when we were discussing curl earlier. It's one of the first things I did was to do a man curl, and I was just blown away by the breadth of the thing, and just doing a man lookup is just scratching the surface, isn't it?
It's a lot of switches. There are 211 current command line arguments, actually.
211 precisely.
211 precisely, exactly. I have a counter.
You know every single one of them.
Yeah, I think so, actually. Well, some of them aren't used that often, so I sort of sometimes I have to go back and double check that I actually know which one I'm talking about. But I've written most of them.
Pretty much exhaustive, though, in that you can some sites, some procedures require cookies. You can mess with cookies. You can do almost anything. James, you had a great question. Go ahead.
Yeah. The question is, well, after 21 years of working away, beavering away at curl, what is still left to do?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Or as my wife tends to say it, aren't you done yet? How long can you do this? But the reality is that the internet and things are, they keep changing. They keep in developing new things and inventing new protocols and changing the old protocols. So things are never done. And in the same way that you upgrade your browser nowadays every 6 weeks or so, and that's not only because people sort of just change the look of the tabs or whatever, but it's actually that a lot of the fundamentals keep moving. So, for example, we did HTTP2 just a few years ago, and there are still, and basically any protocol that curl supports now. It has its developments within different areas. So if we just want to keep up with internet clients and internet servers and how internet is being transferred, we just need to keep on.
And how many protocols is it in total now that curl supports?
I think it's 23 or so, depending on how you count them. But
the ones that people tend to use are FTP and HTTP, aren't they?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, the top ones are HTTP, FTP, SFTP, and yeah, I think those are the most popular ones. And if I mean, the HTTP and HTTPS are by far the most popular ones, and they also have a lot of development. I would say that also that they are the most popular ones, and they are the ones that we work on the most in the code. So they are the ones that are getting our development focus quite clearly.
The one right that now would notice here that's missing is SIP, but I'm joking on that.
No, you don't want to be playing with that. Well, another kind of random question is, how do people get into curl? I mean, do people get taught it at college these days? I asked the question because I managed to miss curl somewhere along the way, and I don't know why. I know it's not that I don't use FTP and SFTP on a daily basis, but I've never curled, and I'm trying to work out why.
That's a good question. I don't know. I would say that these days a lot of, you know, how REST and HTTP APIs have become very popular sort of over the last 5-10 years. And nowadays, a lot of documentation are showing how to use APIs and REST APIs using curl command lines. So nowadays, you can easily find curl command lines in documentations everywhere. So this is how you use our API. By the way, here's the command line to do it. And it happens to show a curl command line. So I would say that's a very common way to learn.
Exactly.
So people just kind of stumble into it kind of by accident, I guess. Yeah. They say they get shown it in use and think, oh, this is a useful tool. Perhaps.
Right. Yeah, but like, how do you learn any tool, right? It's one of those tools that exist on most Linux machines, and you have it in Mac OS, and you know, it's just there. How do you get to know about it?
Okay. Well, another question: what's your view on the future of the command line? As machines get more and more powerful, it's easier to produce graphical user interfaces, and yet the command line continues. Why is that? And what's the future of the command line?
That's a good question. I haven't felt any particular decline in command line use over the last over time. I agree that there's a constant sort of change in how you do things, UI-wise, browser-wise, and everything. So they keep inventing new things how to not use the command line. But there's still and always the set of command line tools, and you want to do scripts, and you want to do your bashes or shell scripts or whatever. So I think it has its future, because there's going to be a fair amount of users who want to program your way around whatever, and you want to do it programmatically. So there is going to be command line tools for the foreseeable future. That's
absolutely. And I would say probably the mass arrival of tools like objects like the Raspberry Pi has given command line another burst of another generation of users that perhaps would not have come across the command line with a Windows PC or a Mac.
Right. Yes. Yeah. But I mean, if you're coming from a Windows perspective, I think you're not that used to the command line, and also that if you're used to the Windows command line, it's sort of a crippled command line. So of course, if you have used that, it's not sort of the real command line.
Yes.
You mentioned, Daniel, that curl is coming to Windows. In what form would that be?
Microsoft is building and shipping curl as part of Windows 10 since some version. Right now, it's only available in their insider build, which is something you need to opt into to get a feel for what's coming. But I think it's around April when that version is shipping for real for all the entire Windows 10 population. So it's
So
this
GUI
native
or
curl build.
command line or it's GUI?
No, it's the command line curl built by Microsoft, shipped to everyone.
So Microsoft, I haven't touched a Windows machine since probably Windows 7. So they completely deprecated command line stuff after what?
No, they haven't. They have I would say they have the opposite. They have a lot of different command line.
Now, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, it's getting better.
Yes.
That's the next piece of news.
Yeah, with Windows, the PowerShell commands and what you can do with them is just taking it much more towards Linux.
And that came when PowerShell?
Server 2008, I think.
That's way past my Windows. I told you I have a piece of hardware out in the garage, which I need to bring in or it's going to just rust away. But it's on Windows 7. My wife is on Windows 8.1. My impression was that in 10, for example, there's a much better, more powerful shell. So maybe that's what you're talking about.
Hello, everyone. If you can hear me, good evening. Hello. On the subject, I just Googled very quickly Windows 10 Linux, and you can install an entire system, Linux subsystem or a distro of your choice from the Windows Store on Windows 10. So yeah, they're mixing things quite interestingly. And the command line will survive forever where we are moving to the cloud and headless servers. So with a headless server in the cloud, you need the command line to operate it, because operating a headless server on the cloud through a GUI is pretty difficult, let's say, and resource intensive, and is not intelligent from my point of view.
Corrado, you're familiar with curl, so what are the things that you've done with it?
Well, probably everything. I'm a Linux guy, so I had access to curl and wget. That is some sort of competition, so we won't mention that again. But yeah, since some of the suppliers I use in my business opened APIs to provision services and things, curl or CURL, how you want to pronounce it, is the tool of choice. Bash scripts with calls to CURL to extract data in JSON format, analysis, and back into the APIs of the website to provision stuff. So it's practically a toolkit. It is a complete bags of tools that you can use at any time to get anything you want from anything on the internet. So basically, it's my daily grind.
Yeah, I was just asking, I asked this on IRC, but I might as well voice it since nobody picked up. Daniel, I see C and then URL, all caps. I've always seen that, but on your site, on hacks.se, you see a lot of CURL in all
lowercase.
Whatever, lowercase. Thank you, James. I lost it there. I was going to say minuscule because living in France, I express myself more in French. So I asked you in IRC, but you can ask here. You can answer here. Which is the preferred? Because on your book, for example, everything curl, it's everything capital E, then CURL all lowercase. What do you prefer?
I actually sort of switched a while back. So I started out with lowercase c, uppercase URL, because URL is the URL and it's sort of commonly written in uppercase, and it was sort of, yeah, it's a client or C URL. So yeah, but that's sort of typing is also still present in our source code headers, so it's still present very notably in the project. But over the years, I've sort of gotten used to that people are always referring to it as curl anyway, so we sort of we mix it uppercase, lowercase, and sort of I've just sort of I gave in and just I'll just use lowercase from now on. And so now, so a few years ago, then when we changed the logo, as you can see there on the book, we switched away from the uppercase URL to the lowercase URL to just call it curl and not do those mixed versions. Which should I use when? So we just used it's curl lowercase. But I mean, we used the other one for a long time, so I use whatever. It's not that important.
It's out, and it is out there quite a bit. It is out there
Yes.
quite. I wanted to ask you about because we're all about visions. This is visions under construction, and curl, even though it's 18 and therefore could go get a beer in most pubs, it's still 18. Did I say it's over 18? It's
21
at least. Yeah. Anyway, it's been around. So, where was I going with that?
You've lost it again, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm.
What's the future?
Yeah,
Well,
what's the future?
Yeah, it did have to do with that, but it was. Sorry about that.
The future.
Where do we go next? What tasks do you have in play at the moment, Daniel?
Well, first, I rarely plan very far ahead because, I mean, this is just my open source project that I do mostly spare time, so I don't have an abundance of time to spend on it, and I don't really I don't really know what's coming next year. So I'm sort of looking much more short term. I'm thinking, what do I do this month or perhaps next, or what do I want to do really short term? And usually I want to keep up with what's going on the internet as a whole. So I try to see where are the browsers going when it comes to, in particular, HTTP and HTTPS, and how to do those things. So that's where I see where we are changing things next. Within the next year, we are going to introduce Quick in the browsers, and I want to do Quick in curl, and there's going to be more DNS over HTTPS. So I want to do a DNS over HTTPS for curl as well, just to keep up with what the browsers are doing. So stuff like that. Where the internet world is going, I want to make sure that curl is with us, so that all of us who are playing with the internet stuff, we can use curl as that testing tool and experiment tool, and I want it to be up to par with what the internet wants and should have.
Yeah, of course, and curl or URL, whatever, is also very, very useful for the Internet of Things.
Yes.
So it's a very powerful tool again, but a headless server could interrogate a number of devices on the IoT with a very light footprint. So you can run things on literally a Raspberry Pi 3rd generation and have your own server running in your home with peanuts.
And the library then is also has also then made it conquer the world in the IoT world, if we even include larger things as IoT, like libcurl is very popular in cars, for example. So there's basically not a single modern car who doesn't use curl in them, which is sort of interesting, I think. Who would have thought that 5 years ago?
Fascinating. That's fascinating.
So a very quick question, Daniel. What is your favorite confectionery or type of sweet or candy? It wouldn't happen to be made by Cadbury's in the UK. And by Curly Whirly by any chance?
No.
Have you ever had a Curly Whirly?
I don't think so. What is that?
Describe it. You've never ever experienced a Curly Whirly?
I don't think even I've seen it.
You've never used curl, and you've never had Curly Whirly. So.
I'm just looking at the website now, which I've tried to share and it'll work. It's described as chewy and curly, wavy and whirly, a swirly ladder of golden caramel draped in Cadbury milk chocolate. Everybody's favorite twisty treat. And you know what? I'm going to send you some.
Yeah. The unfortunate thing is that it's now half the size of what it used to be, but
what you said.
It's not related. Yeah, it's not related to programming matters in any way.
No, but the name is good. So I think you could actually approach Cadbury's chocolate and ask for a sponsorship deal.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we do a lot of voice over IP, which uses session initiation protocol, or SIP. And so we decided that we would approach the Sipsmith distillery, who make Sipsmith gin, and see whether they would sponsor us. And they did. So if we can get gin, you can certainly get chocolate bars.
Who is us in that, James? Because I've never seen
mainly me, really.
Daniel, I wanted to get into also. There's a list of 10 or more developers who have participated in the project, and I loved your comment, by the way, on the book, which is that you were hoping to become a co-author, which sounds like it means that you've written all of it so far. What about some of the other people, and how can people participate if they're interested? I mean, God, what better way to contribute something to the world that we live in than writing stuff for curl? So how do people get involved in the project?
Well, we actually, I would say that we have a pretty huge amount of contributors in general. I try to make sure that we make a note and give credit to everyone who helps out in any way, reporting bugs, mentioning typos, and improving things in general. And that list of names is now approaching 1,700.
Wow.
I think, yeah, I think really soon we're going to cross that number. So, and in the code we're approaching 600 people who have actually written code for curl. So I think we have a lot of people, even though the core team here, where you've done more than, say, 100 commits to curl, that's a really low number. I think we're about 10 or 12 people who have worked that much. And in general, people find the project. It's at curl.hacks.se, and you find a problem, you find a code, and you do whatever. You send a patch if you're up to that. You report a bug if you have experienced a problem. So we're a small project, really. I mean, we may have succeeded in that it is used by a lot of people everywhere, but we're just a handful of people who are actually sticking around. So it's easy to get involved. It's easy. We're easy to talk to. We're easy to approach, and we don't have any bureaucracy or big hurdles to cross. If you find a bug, you find a typo in the documentation, you just put that in a bug report and we fix it.
Can you share some of the latest things that have happened, either as a result of bugs found, just in general, bugs found, or new features? What recently has happened that has caused an update? I mean.
Well, we have a bug fix rate of roughly, we have at least one bug fix a day. We're probably closer to 3 per day on average. So there's a lot. And we do releases every 8 weeks, basically on the clock. If nothing else happens that makes us do them faster. So every 56 days we do releases. And typically we have 40 to 50 people contribute things in that period, and we typically do 100 bug fixes or 120 in those 56 days. So we did a release 2 days ago on the 24th. It contained 82 bug fixes and 2 changes in the curl 7.58.0. So there's this constant flood of things, actually. So yeah,
curl is such a terrific example of a tool. It does one thing in the philosophy of Linux. Does one thing, it does it well. It has 50 million options and different flags and things that you can do with it. And it's a whole universe of complexity, in fact. So I understand exactly why you would have so many bug fixes and so many different things, because as there's an infinite number of inputs, you're eventually, something's not going to work in a combination of flags or options. So, you know, that makes complete sense. But it's just fascinating because in the end, the actual solution that curl brings is an extremely simple thing. It's a request, like you're sitting in a restaurant and you go, could we have some more water? That's kind of what curl does, right? And
Yes.
the response can be horribly complex.
Yeah.
And then problems can be incredibly difficult to find in that. James has posted an image, and I'm going to try to find it and perhaps show it. Oh, hands off. Good.
I actually get the question fairly often, sort of in the matter that, well, I tried curl like 10 years ago and it worked fine, and I tried it now and it works. It still works, sort of. So what have you been doing all this time? What keeps you busy? It's the same thing, right?
Here's the hands off my curly whirly. Thank you, James. Okay, stop that. Yeah, well, there's that too. I mean, it just works. I personally have not had problems. The only problem I've ever had with curl is operator error, where I do something that goes, in fact, I think curl is exemplary because I believe that it said, oh, did you mean we should ignore? There's some message that comes in if you mess up and there's a certificate problem, because that's always the problem I have had. If there's a certificate problem, it'll say something like, I mean, I'm being kind of sarcastic here, but it says something like, well, if you want us to ignore the certificate, we can. I can't remember exactly how that works out, but there is actually some help. The error message that comes out when you have a problem with certificates, I'm pretty sure actually suggests a solution, which is fantastic, I think.
It does. Well, that's sort of one of the if you're using curl and you've ever used it a little bit, that's probably one of the things you ran into, that problem with certificates, because that's a sort of a common thing to run into.
Yeah, it would be. And this day and age, certificates expire. I mean, we've had that happen with a couple of our certificates, and when they do, your browser says one thing, but of course, curl is like a browser, but it needs to tell a human being what's wrong. So kudos for that. I think that's, as far as I remember, curl is really exemplary in that behavior. Any other questions? We need to open this up for questions. We have some time left. Otherwise, we're going to move on maybe a little off curl and talk about a few other things. First of all, questions about curl or about Daniel's work with curl or the team. And we're looking at ChooseZipDX. Hit *6, or is it #6, Michael? I think *6, I think, to unmute. Say your question. People, operator, stand by.
Oh. I may have a small question. Given the number of commits for bug fixes and probably new feature implementations, how do you keep track of everything? Do you have a team that takes care of that, or are you relying on your own volition and gumption?
Well, we don't. I mean, everything is on GitHub. We just have, the code is in Git. We have issues, the issue tracker on Git, and we have pull requests on GitHub. So it's not that hard to keep track of. It's not that the volumes aren't that bad. So yeah, I mostly keep track of them, but it's not that difficult actually.
How much time do you dedicate to that every day?
I spend probably around 2 hours per day. Yeah,
remarkable.
Pretty much.
That's impressive.
For 20 years.
That's impressive, and it brings up another question, which is, again, with your vision, why do you give so many things away free to humanity? The documents, the work, all this incredible amount of work on curl. You apparently were brought up in a way that contributing to the culture in general, the culture of the internet in this case, is something to be proud of. And it is. I'm not questioning that. I'm just asking your opinion of why you got into this, because you're spending how many 20 years of 2 hours a day, at least, probably in the beginning, way more. How is this helping you?
Well, it helps me in the way that curl and my fascination in internet protocols has formed my entire career. So now the fact that I work at Mozilla and with Firefox now, it's sort of, I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't been so stuck on internet protocols and doing HTTP and curl and everything. So it's sort of my interest in this and my life and my career, they all go hand in hand. But I started out basically just being fascinated by the concept of open source, and I always liked programming. So of course, I also wanted to be one of those making things and giving it away, because I thought it was a fun thing to do, and I think it's sort of a grand thing to do. And then, of course, being able to do open source for free and give it away is a sort of a luxury position too. So I mean, of course, you have to have so as long as I think it's fun, it's my hobby, and I have a job that pays my sort of food on the table, so then why not? It's fun. I like doing it.
And you learn things every day, I would assume.
Oh, absolutely.
And
there are some downsides too, but let's ignore them for now.
Yeah, let's ignore those. The glass is half full. Daniel, how do you get hooked up? We're going to talk a few minutes about Firefox and Mozilla, because I think it's interesting. And of course, because that's a big organization, you're obviously free to say what you can and can't say or whatever. But it'd be interesting already to see how you began with that. Many of us here, and this is my case, recall the operation of Netscape and Netscape Server, and then Mozilla, and that whole progression of the different browser wars and all of that. Where did you first meet Firefox?
Well, I think Netscape released their code in the spring 1998, just sort of a few months before I released my first version of curl. But
Interesting.
Well, of course, I knew about Mozilla and Firefox since a long time, actually. So I've always appreciated the organization that Mozilla is and what it stands for and so on. But for me personally, it was that I've been working as a consultant for my own company for a very long time. And then a couple of years ago, I just looked around to get another gig for my consultancy, sort of, what should I do next? Is there any interesting gigs to work on? And then one of the guys at Mozilla reached out and asked me if I wanted to consider working for Mozilla next. And yes, I did. So I did some interviews with Mozilla, and I started at Mozilla as a full-time employee in 2014. And for me, it was a chance to, since curl has always been my spare time project, and I've been working mostly with embedded systems and embedded Linux during daytime, this was my opportunity to suddenly start working much more with internet and protocols all day, work day and spare time, everything. So it was a great opportunity for me, and I still think that Mozilla is a great place to do that on. So yeah, it was a perfect fit for me.
I think those of us like you who are able to work in an area that you're passionate about are blessed in a way that unfortunately not everybody has a chance to do. It's impossible. I think that probably everybody in the film strip below would agree that it's amazing to be able to wake up in the morning and say, oh, I've got work to do. Whereas a lot of people, it's drudgery. And I can never start a day without really being pleased that I am lucky, or whatever it is, that, of course, I'm retired anyway, but the point is that even when I was working in a field that I loved. And Daniel, it seems to me that you are, again, the perfect example of that. You're passionate about what you're doing. You agreed very quickly to come on and share this with us, which I really appreciate, honestly, personally. It's a lot of times a battle to get people on and talk about what they're doing. And a lot of times it's because they're not motivated by passion. Whereas the folks that are, like we had Richard Newman on last week, he's making a camera, an incredible camera. These guys, when they wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's because they have an idea to improve the camera. How much do you, here's a good question for you, because I used to do this when I was working on programming and demos and stuff. You wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with an idea. Now, you have a family, and I'm married, and so it's a little weird to just jump out of bed at 3 a.m. and do something. But do you have this problem? Do you wake up in the middle of the night with ideas?
Usually I don't. I usually stay up far too late. So sort of when I finally go to bed, I'm sort of, I'm like a rock until the alarm bell goes off in the morning. So then I get up and start working. So I'd rather have the opposite problem, that I stay up far too long working with my. I'll just want to get this done before I go to bed. And now this showed up. I'd better fix this too. And then the clock is past 1 in the morning, and and then.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of us have that problem too. And I recall when I was working in a company, everybody at 5 o'clock was like, "Okay, salut, goodbye," and I would want to finish this routine I was working on, whatever it was. That interruption wasn't coming through. Whatever the detail was, it drove me crazy. And if it was on a Friday, it was even worse, because I knew there'd be 2 days where I wasn't working on it and I didn't have the equipment at home. Anyway, let's look at people's questions if they have any, but also if there's anything that we haven't said, Daniel, about your work, whether it's for Mozilla or on curl, anything we've missed that you'd like to talk about.
No, I think that's probably a no. But something I've noticed is that all the people we've had on the VUC for the last, I don't know, 6 months, everyone is of the type that you just described. So doing something that they're really passionate about. And I look in the little film strip here, and all of us all do things that we enjoy doing with a passion.
And I'm going to show that film strip since you mentioned it.
Oh.
Isn't that amazing?
That's scary.
Okay, well, I guess the next thing to do is just to thank everybody who's in that film strip. Somebody just dropped out too.
Sorry, that's me. I pressed the wrong button.
Double James. Thank you to Andy Smith and Corrado Mella and James Bodie and Michael Graves and myself. I thank myself. Daniel, thank you very much. It was really super to have you.
Yeah, it's great to have somebody who is so dedicated and produces so much value for the world on. So yeah, big thumbs up. Open source, it's wonderful. Where would we be without it?
Couldn't agree more. Thank you, not just for joining us, Daniel, but for everything you do. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we're going to leave you, love you and leave you. And next week, I'm not sure what's happening because I'm old and I don't have anything in front of me that notes it. We do have Paul Vixie coming on. Paul Vixie's a name you might know, Daniel, I think.
Yes. I don't think I've met him, but I know his by name.
You could meet him on February 5th, I think it is.
Well, that's the voyage of discovery. You've never met Paul Dick Nixie, and you've never had a curly whirly bar. But we're going
exactly. What do I do?
Well, don't worry. When we go off air, you can give us your address, and I'll send you some.
And we are going to be on air right now because we are going to our mature audiences only version right at this moment. Thank you, everybody. Take care. See you next week.